Today on Seventh Circle Gaming, we've got a game I've been wanting to talk about for a while. Now, it's Age of Wonders Planetfall. And we'll get started with the disclosures. Pause the video at this point if you want to read them. Let's move on to Immersion. And we'll start with Agency. There is an option to customize a player hero character in a number of different ways with positive traits, negative traits, and costumes. The game presents a fair amount of challenge to the player and two different levels, both a strategic and a tactical level. And the game is presented in this isometric perspective that you can see on the right hand side there. And a lot of the units seem to draw their inspiration from a lot of different franchises like StarCraft, Battlestar Galactica, the original 1970s version, not so much the 2003 version, Star Wars, and a little bit of Star Trek even. There's a fair amount of statistics to analyze in the game and attempt to use understanding them to optimize performance, and especially in the campaign mode, the game attempts to immerse players with a story. Unfortunately, it does seem they're likely to be skipped over as players are trying to get to the next combat situation, the next strategic choice. And the game has earned, for Immersion, a 9 out of 15. I do have a couple more screens to show you to demonstrate further what we're talking about. And the first of them is this, which is the typical upgrade screen or research screen that one might see in a lot of other games of this genre. However, in this game, it does allow simultaneous research of social upgrades and military upgrades. And a lot of those, as you can see, have turn counters, and they mousing over them will show roughly the effects of them. And this is the battle screen that we were talking about earlier. It's more the tactical interface. And this is the second level of interaction and immersion that the game attempts to use to immerse players with. Let's move on now to difficulty. And difficulty is one of the really high points of the game. It has earned an absolutely perfect top marks, 15 out of 15. The game has, quite simply, every option possible available. The effects on gameplay are very well described, and the user interface doesn't really negatively impact gameplay or make the game more difficult than it should be. So an absolutely perfect 15 out of 15 for difficulty. But let's move on to Lasting Appeal. Now, Lasting Appeal, the game has earned a 6 out of 15. There is a substantial amount of mod support. There are also 3-4 downloadable content packs to purchase available at the present time. There's also a fair amount of options to interact with the game, as you can see from the screen on the right. However, those options can be somewhat confusing. What's the difference between a new empire, a new planet, and a new campaign? It's not really terribly well described. And a player who is starting the game for the first time, that can be somewhat confusing. So, then let's move on, and we are going to get to the final analysis. And the final score for the game is a 10 out of 15. And I do want to caveat the next statement by saying that it is a very subjective statement. Age of Wonders Planetfall is a game that I desperately personally want to like. But thus far, I have not found a faction that I'm terribly interested in. And despite all of the customization options, I personally have not seen a significant gameplay effect from them. So it's sort of throwing out a lot of options and doing nothing with them. Or at least seeming to do nothing with them. So, with that subjective statement aside, there are substantial options to fine-tune the difficulty, there are varied factions, and there are customizable hero characters to create. There's also 2 different levels of interaction available to players in the game, all of which are to the good. And the game has really, I believe, earned that average 10 out of 15, which is, again, substantially below average. It's only substantially above average. It's only 5 points below what would be considered a potentially perfect game. And that's all I've got to say about this one, other than to ask you to do the typical YouTube things, share, comment, do cartwheels, whatever. But please leave us a comment, because it's with your comments that I really learn what areas you'd like to see more focus on or less focus on. And that's all I've got to say for today. Goodbye.